Hi guys, we're back now after rebooting our router. Once you reboot the router, you're presented with this screen. It prompts you to change the default username and password, so I'm going to change that here now. The very next thing I do after resetting the username and password is that I reset the router back to factory defaults. And that's a good practice because your older firmware, which would be the stock Netgear firmware, that would still have some settings like your Wi-Fi settings and your LAN settings and other sort of stuff that you would not want there to be cached on the router's memory. So the best thing is just to get rid of all of that. So now if you try to go to the administration page, because you've changed the password, it prompts you for the password again. I'm going to reset the router to factory defaults. The option is in management, and at the very bottom it tells you to reboot router. You'll be able to go to factory defaults, and then you should be able to select the option to reset the router back to factory defaults. Now, while that's going to reboot, I'm going to pop it on pause because it's going to take a couple of minutes. Now, we are back now after rebooting our router. I have to type in the IP address again to get to my router's web interface. I forgot to mention this. The way you find the web interface of the router, the IP address is by going into a command prompt and type in CMD, press enter there, and then type in ipconfig, and you should be able to see where it says the default gateway. That's the web interface of your router, and actually I'll just mark it just to make sure that everybody is able to clearly understand what I'm talking about. I'll try to mark it as best as I can. Not very easy to use a mouse, but anyway, you get the picture. Default gateway 192.168.1.1. That's what goes up at the top in the address bar, and that will give you the management page of the router. Now, we have reset the router back to factory defaults. Obviously, this would have been reset back to the default password and username again. So I'm going to reset that back again. Just like, and if I click on any of the options at the top there, it's going to ask me for password again because obviously I'm changing it here. So the very first thing after I do a DDwrt install on any of the routers is I secure my Wi-Fi, and I'm paranoid about having an insecure Wi-Fi. Well, that would be quite obvious because if I don't secure that network, anybody who could be scanning for networks can get connected to our Wi-Fi network very quickly and easily, and you're quite open and vulnerable there. You can see all the options that are there. There's the wireless mode access point. There are two options there, 2.4 and 5 gigahertz. This router is a dual band router, so it's both 2.4 and 5 gigahertz options, both of them. You can give two separate SSIDs. SSID is the bit that you see on your Wi-Fi mobile phone or your laptop or anything when you scan for all the Wi-Fi SSIDs. So the visible SSID, you can give them meaningful names, like for the 2.4 I'll at the default. For the 5 gigahertz, I'll put a 5 beside it. Just do that. This is the 5 gigahertz network. Quite a big fan of 5 gigahertz network I am, because there's not a lot of traffic out there. Not a lot of people are using the 5 gigahertz network. Then you don't. 5 gigahertz network doesn't have that range as much as the 2.4, but it's personal preference. I tend to go for 5 gigahertz because of the 5 gigahertz channel not being so much congested at the moment. Now, after I have configured my channels and my SSIDs, I'll go to secure and I'll put a password on it. There are different types of security options you have once it comes to securing your Wi-Fi connection. You can either use a passphrase, or you can use a radius server, which basically authenticates against a database of username and passwords. The DDwrt version 24 SP2, it has basically a full-blown proper Radius server. By default, as you can see, the security mode is none and none, so it's quite open for anybody to connect to. WL0 is for the 2.4 gigahertz, WL1 is for the 5 gigahertz network, and what I would do for the time being is that I use WPA2 personal key there, which is basically just any word or any passphrase or anything meaningful that you can remember. And you can use the same sort of for both of them, or you can have separate different level of security for either of them, or you can have WPA2 on 2.4, you can have WPA on 5 gigahertz, and just bear in mind, once you don't choose WP, which is the most insecure, and it's very easy to crack WP, so hence WPA2, or even more secure is WPA2 Enterprise, which uses radius authentication. This router, R7000, just bear in mind, has a proper inbuilt radius server, and I mean a proper inbuilt radius server. It's not like your regular routers where they give you an option to point to another radius server, which could be a server that's running on the same network, and users can authenticate against that. You can see the other extended wireless options for WL0 and WL1 there. You can basically have different levels of radius authentication. You can either use the MAC-based authentication or the shared key-based authentication. We'll go in more detail about this in a separate video, and I'll be able to talk you through how to set up a router on this router and how to use it to authenticate user against a database of username and passwords. There are more details as you go down. As soon as you click on enable at the radius server, it gives you more options, which are the advanced options, and you can choose the power of the antennas. There are 3 antennas on this, so you can choose the left antenna and the right antenna, and which are either use both of them. That probably would not be in the scope of this video, but you can, if you want to research that yourself, you're more than welcome to it. And WL1 advanced settings are the same as WL0 advanced settings. There wouldn't be much difference. And they also use WL1 WDS, which is basically a way to connect devices by pressing a button at the back of the router. A more interesting thing that I should probably point out is that the extensive help system in DDwrt, which as you see on top right there, and if you click on more of the pages of the web interface, it will give you a detailed description of it, so which is pretty good. I think DDwrt guys have put a lot of effort in trying to make it as much user-friendly as possible and trying to get the most out of your router. If you look into the I'm looking at WL0 WDS security settings there, which basically allowed secure your network by using MAC address filtering. You know, this is the 2.4. Bear in mind, WL0 is 2.4, WL1 is 5 gigahertz, and you can configure more options there. You can have a separate DHCP server for this. You can NAT different ports, and you can enter the MAC addresses. It allows you up to I would say 12, just counting as I speak, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. You can have 10 MAC addresses there, and you can use MAC address filtering to allow or refuse any connections using the WDS authentication. WDS stands for, again, Wireless Distribution System. It actually says that at the top there as well. So going back to your settings. Now that I've secured the router, I've configured the SSDs and everything. The next thing that I like to do in my DDwrt router is configure my local LAN. Local LAN would basically the default for my local 168.1.1. And I'm already using my service provider, which has a DHCP of 192.168.2.1. Although it's a separate network, but for simplicity, what I do is I choose a local LAN subnet of 10.0.0.1, which allows me to immediately recognize the devices, what network they are connected to. It also helps me to secure my network as well, because if I have two separate routers, I can secure the network by running all the services on the other router. And this is it for now. What we're going to do in the next video, I'll show you how to configure radius authentication servers, and also we're going to go into a bit more detail about the different services that you can enable there. VPN is one of them as well, and you can assign VPN services. You can connect to your router remotely from outside of the network. Before we go, just a very quick thing I would like to show you is, if you go into the setup, talking about LAN, I'll actually show you how you can do it. You can actually change that setting here, 10.0.0.1, and leave it at 255.255.255.0, and then you can leave the DHCP server, because that will allocate all the IP addresses. Leave the NTP client to update your time on the router, and also the DNS servers you can use 8.8.8.8, which is the Google server if you want to use that. But I leave it at the default, which is my service provider's DNS server. You might also be able to notice that the WAN IP at the top right is 192.168.2.15. That WAN IP is being provided by my service provider router, which is sitting literally in the next room beside me. And a cable coming from there is going into the WAN port of my Netgear R7000 router. Now you might notice that I'm disconnected now. That's because I've changed the default gateway IP address to 10.0.0.1. So I need to go at the top there, and I need to punch in those IP details in the address bar so I can connect to the interface of my router using the new IP address. And voila, there you go. We are back in there, and obviously because it's you're reconnecting, you have to forget password if you try to change any of the settings. You can see that you have a new default gateway, a new IP address, by doing an IP config here. It should take a while to IP address settings, and I'll do an IP config flush DNS, and then let's IP config and see if we have the new IP address. And we don't. Okay. I love it when things don't work, because then we can troubleshoot it together. I'll try to do an IP config release all. The easiest way, the quickest way that I find works is if I go into the network settings on the bottom right beside the clock. You click on your network icon and then click on Open Network and Sharing Center, and that should allow you access to your adapters, network adapters. I'm connected to the local LAN, so I'm physically into a cable, and what you can do is you can disable your adapter and re-enable it, as did just now, and voila, there you go, you're connected back in it. It automatically picks up the new IP address, and if I do an IP config here, I should be able to get the 10.0.0. Let's see, what's the new IP address we will be getting now? Yes. There we go. And now we are being presented with the username and password screen. And at the top right, keep an eye on that. See where it says 192.168.2.15? That's not going to change. That will still, because that's the WAN IP address of my router. And you can see here that the local IP has changed to 10.0.0.1. You have the DDNS services options here. You can see if you have a account like no IP gives you free account, DNS gives free accounts as well. You can set up different advanced routing protocols, BGP, RIP routing protocols. If you're more and you want to go into that level of fine-grained detail, you can set up your VLANs. What I really love about this version of DDwrt is the VLANs are all colorful. The green ones mean that there's a cable plugged into them. Reds are not active. Usually your 4 LAN ports are in the VLAN 1. Your port would be usually VLAN 2, and your wireless Wi-Fi port is usually a part of the LAN VLAN as well, as you can see down there. And then we have different networking options here as well, which basically allows you to have tagged ports. You can set up a bridge between multiple routers. You can you can do all sorts of different routing variations that you want to use. The help system that I was talking about earlier. So if you click on help, that actually gives you more about what tagging is, what bridging is, and all of that. Pretty slick, extensive help system. Sure, it's the equivalent of the Linux man command, where you can have a manual for different commands. If you set up VLANs and if you set up different, it actually allows you to have your own separate DHCP for each VLAN, which is pretty good, if you want to have multiple networks. If you go into the services option, there's the most useful service. There are plenty of them here. Well, they're all useful, but the one that we're going to talk about in a separate video is the SSHD service. This allows you to connect remotely to your house as a VPN, and you can set up a VPN connection anywhere in the world and connect to your house. But we'll talk in more detail about that in a separate video. You can also use a DNS mask if you have multiple websites and you want to use one IP address. You can use that, and we'll talk about that in a separate video as well. Free radius, that's a proper radius server inbuilt into this router, a full-blown radius server, and it's very cool. What you can do is you can use to others. You can set up users here. You can set up clients. If you click on add, it should allow you to add new users. But that's not going to work. If I click on it, it wouldn't react. It wouldn't do anything. The reason is because I need to enable the JFFS file systems for this work. But as I said, we'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a separate video. And the other options that would be quite useful here is the likes of your access restrictions on it, and again you can check the help system there on the right, and that'll give you detail about every page that's there. But if I go in VPN, this again is a proper full-blown open VPN server running on it. This is not your usual pass-through VPN in every router. You can actually connect to this using a VPN client, which is a part of the SSHD that I just mentioned earlier. And again, if you look at the setup options there, that's where you enable the JFFS to file system, which will basically allow you to enable and set up your radius server. I'll just enable it for now. We'll revisit this again in a separate video when we are going to talk about how to set up the radius authentication and how to set up a radius server. But for the time being, as you can see, there's just over 17 megabytes available space on the NVRAM. And if I go back to the services section, I should be able to see I should be able to add a user there now, or even add a client. There you go. So you can add a client there and type in a shared key, which will be used to by the clients to authenticate, and you can also add users there. I'm just going to add, a Joe, you know, with password of hello world there, and you can also set up the download speed and the upload speed. You can restrict their download and upload speed, and you can generate a cert there as well, you know. So it'll be sort of an SSL cert that they'll use to connect to the server. As I said, I'm just very quickly going over this, just giving you an overview of it, but we are going to go into a lot more detail about why we are doing all of this. I click on apply settings, because apply settings doesn't restart your router. If you click save, that does a soft reset of the router. Basically, once you apply the changes, you should be able to carry on walking away. That's all for now, guys, and I'll see you in the... Don't forget to subscribe and see my other videos in which we'll talk in more detail about. Thanks very much for watching. And as you can see, that